All right, it looks like we have some more people joining, so we'll, I guess, officially kick this off. I'll start by introducing myself again. I'm Sam Patterson, and I'm a marketing manager for some of the MarTech solutions we have here at PFL, or Printing for Less. And today I'm joined by Vanessa Porter, and she's the Director of Marketing for SnapApp. And so we're excited. Yep, there's Vanessa. We're excited to talk to you today about your content marketing strategies and a little bit about how interactive content can help you drive more engagement with your buyers and really boost up that content marketing strategy. So before we get too far, I want to just share a few housekeeping items with you guys. So first, this is a webinar on interactive content, so we'd love for you to interact with us. Feel free to share any questions or comments in the chat section of the control panel or through the questions section. We'll be keeping an eye on those throughout the webinar, and we'll be addressing some questions as we go in the chat, but then also verbally some questions at the end of the presentation. We're also recording this, so we'll be sending the recording and the slide deck to all of you when we're done here. All right, so we'll get started here with the first slide. So it's safe to say we'd pretty much all be billionaires if we got $1 every time someone said content marketing. It's kind of been the buzzword of the past couple of years. We hear it everywhere. A lot of people are implementing it in their organizations. So it's not really a question now about whether or not you'll use content marketing. It's how are you going to make the most of it. You've probably hired some content writers, maybe you've secured a nice budget for your strategy, and maybe you're just really getting started and getting rolling with content marketing. But what we're tending to see a lot with our customers and our peers is a lot of people are still struggling to reach their audience and to create content that actually engages and converts. And if you're feeling like that, do know you're not alone, and we're here to help you with that today. Our worst fear is content, beautiful content, really well written and helpful. You pour your heart into it, and then it goes and sits and collects dust in a resource library. So we want to stop that from happening. We want to help you get the most out of your content. So we're going to share a few tips and tricks today on how to do that. So I'll start off by saying the answer for dealing with this issue of your content not being noticed is not to create more content or to spend more money promoting it. We all know as marketers that we're just constantly bombarded by content, and it's way more than we could possibly consume in a day. So as a result, it's getting harder and harder to break through that noise and actually get noticed. But what we need to do is be smarter, not necessarily louder. So in order to do that, you have to find ways to make your content as engaging and interactive as possible. So this means going beyond those one-dimensional blog posts, those white papers that are collecting dust. It means creating interactive, dynamic content that will captivate your buyers and then immerse them in this interactive experience. We like to think of interactive content as experiences. So those experiences can be online or offline experiences, and that's why SnapApp and PFL have joined together to bring you some examples and best practices on that a little further on in this webinar. But first I want to kick it off to you, Vanessa, if you could tell us a little more about what interactive content is, just in case some people aren't quite familiar with what is included in that.
Absolutely. So first let me say interactive content is really about a conversation. So when you think about interactive content, right now you guys are all listening on this webinar. First, thank you. We're so glad that you guys were able to join us on this webinar. But this right now is kind of a monologue. You're sitting back and you're listening to Samantha and I kind of give you the ins and outs about interactive content. But if we were together in person, it would be much more of a conversation. You would have a chance to ask questions. We could then tailor our responses based on what you're interested in. And there's this active engagement. And so what interactive content is all about is creating that interactive or that engagement, that back and forth, that conversation, both online and offline. Because right now, most of us, again, as Samantha said, we're all creating good content, but it's kind of this one-way static interaction. You know, a lot of us create good content, we put it up on a landing page, that landing page is gated, and then someone downloads something and we have no idea what they're looking at. So this active engagement is pretty important, and it can turn out into all sorts of things. So, you know, direct mail kits are a wonderful way that you can do that. You can also do it through quizzes and surveys, assessments, interactive infographics, anything, again, where you're allowing people to give their input, whether that's by answering a question or maybe putting in a calculation or something and having that back and forth. So let's kind of figure out why that would work. And we're going to do a quick poll. So let me see if this is working. Cool. So we're going to do a quick poll. I believe you guys are all viewing it right now. And let me ask you, how many of you guys have created a white paper or an ebook or something where you've taken a good amount of time to really, you know, put out your thoughts and your questions? All right, we're seeing a huge yes. Almost 90% of you have said yes. In the last 3 months, you've created a white paper or some sort of large piece of content. All right, that's good to know. So let's get to the next question. So the next one is, all right, in the last 3 months, how many of you have actually read something that you've downloaded? So you went to someone's site, maybe it was SnapApp site, maybe it was Printing for Less's site, and you downloaded a white paper. How many of you actually read it? All right, we're getting a lot more notes, and it's okay to be honest. I think what, you know, the point behind this, right now we have, I think you guys can all see the real time, you know, half of you haven't. And I think that's important because a lot of us are creating this content. And as Samantha said, the content is good. You know, our white papers have really, really great insights. They have really great, you know, pieces of information, but we don't know if people are actually reading it. As you can see, a lot of you guys aren't reading content that you're downloading. Imagine how those marketers are feeling, right? So we're like, yes, but people are kind of no to our content. And that kind of gets to the heart of why interactive content works. So interactive content really works because you have that dialogue, right? You know, being able to engage is so much more interesting. I bet you guys have just started paying attention much more to our webinar because there was a poll and you guys actually got to interact with it. Not only that, people like to compete. They like to compare. I mean, that was really fascinating to see how people voted. And it was cool to see those results kind of come in real time. That's the same thing with our content. We want to know, especially depending on your audience, you know, a lot of people in their industries are learning through content, and so they want to see what their peers are doing, whether it's through networking or something else. You want to be able to share your opinions. If you have an idea or you want to voice it out, you should be able to have your content to be able to do that. And these are all wins. These are all things that interactive content allows you to do. Not only that, you know, there's this great stat that Demand Gen report pulled out, which is 91% of buyers prefer more interactive and visual content that can be accessed on demand, which means that buyers are looking for something that's a little bit more interesting. At the end of the day, we are all consumers, and yes, while many of us work at B2B companies and sell to other businesses, it doesn't mean our content has to be boring. We need to be able to stand out among all this noise, and something where there's that active engagement is a great way. The other thing is all this information that we're going to pull, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit, is a great way that we can feed into our data. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But before we do, Samantha, why don't you tell us a little bit about the science behind interactive content?
All right, great. So a lot of what Vanessa just said about what makes digital interactive content so powerful still applies to physical content. And the physical content even kicks things up sometimes a notch further because it is interactive in its nature. You know, it puts your brand directly in the hands of your customers. You know, it's your chance to give life to your brand. It really gets prospects that chance to sink their fingers into it and turn it over in their hands and feel it. And this experience with your brand, it stimulates multiple senses and emotions, which makes that interaction more memorable for them. And you can see on the screen here we have some beautiful brain shots of some recent MRI research that actually proves that physical pieces, they leave a deeper footprint in the brain. They drive more emotional processing, and they result in greater internalization. So what does all that really mean? Well, basically, direct mail engages parts of the brain that have to do with visual and spatial information. And this suggests that physical material is more real to the brain. You know, it has a meaning, it has a place, and this connects direct mail to your prospect's memory and their emotional centers and creates a powerful connection that is unique to tangible marketing. So now that you know some of the numbers and science behind why interactive content works, we're going to take a quick look at some more numbers on how it impacts us as marketers. So I'd like to reference back to that quote, that stat that Vanessa shared on the 91% of B2B marketers are preferring visual and interactive content. So we know that they're asking for these engaging formats, and then we're seeing that when we actually provide them with those formats, they're engaging and converting more often. So we're seeing marketers getting 42% click rates, 71% content completion rates, and up to 13% uplift in lead form conversions when they're using that digitally interactive content. And we're seeing that physical interactive pieces are driving results too, especially when they are combined with digital campaigns. We really like to stress that here at PFL, that your physically interactive pieces are going to be much more impactful when they're combined with a multi-channel approach. So you're integrating it with digitally interactive content. So they have multiple ways that they can interact with your brand. And so we're seeing around 60% lift in ROI when marketers are doing this. And other research is also showing that 64% of recipients of a direct mail piece actually visit a website in reaction to direct mail. So I always like to say you're using this physically interactive piece to drive digital action with your brand. So those are some pretty impressive numbers, and it's pretty clear that you can't afford to not work more interactive experiences into your marketing. So I'm going to hand it back over to Vanessa.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so I really love the word that you said a minute ago, which was combine, because when we think about it, and when we think about what we're actually doing and what we're going to challenge everyone here on the webinar to do, is really about kind of combining all your marketing efforts together to create a great experience for your users. So for many of us today, what typically happens is first we think about the content, and then we think about the campaigns. So we create a bunch of content, and then we start to try to derive campaigns from that content, and we kind of tie it all together. But instead, the way that I think marketers should be thinking about it is thinking about how to create content-enabled campaigns. So really infusing the content experience with the campaign to really create a cohesive experience for your user. And the reason you want to do that is because campaigns are experiences. Let's see. Sorry, everyone. Great. Campaigns are experiences. And that's really important. That's a really big, I think, kind of mental shift is, you know, as people are thinking about that experience, that conversation, that back and forth, you know, providing people with things that they want, making sure things are easy and quick and people don't have to go dig around for a bunch of information. Instead, it's right there. These are all good things because at the end of the day, marketers are really in charge of delivering business to sales. Downloads are great, but new business is way better. And I think as we start to think about that and stop producing downloads and start producing new business, that's when we're going to start seeing marketers really kind of take the lead in the business. Obviously, I'm in marketing. I'm a big believer that marketing should have a very large seat at the revenue table, and this is how we're going to be able to do that. So let's take a minute and kind of dig through it tactically how that would actually look and where you would begin. So as you start to think about the experience that your users are having, you probably have identified a top, middle, and bottom part of the funnel. And like most marketers, you probably have content for each of those. But because the content can feel really daunting and you want to put all your best stuff forward, you most likely have these very large kind of evergreen pieces for each phase of the funnel. You probably have an ebook on the 10 ways X is better for Y. You might have a white paper on, the definitive benchmark study on X in the industry. And you might have a success story like, hey, learn how customer I keep using Y. Learn why customer Y is doing awesome. And these are great. But the problem is, if someone doesn't want to read a 10-page ebook, there's really no other content options for them. If they don't want to read a 50-page white paper or 40-page white paper, there's no other options for them. If they don't want to read that case study, there's no options for them. And this is where interactive content or interactive experiences really come into play. Because what you're going to be able to do is really be able to expand the funnel. So if you were to take a 50-page white paper, let's say, and remember it has these really great stats and it has these images and all that stuff, and you were to slice and dice it into smaller, more bite-sized pieces of content, things that people can consume really quickly. So instead of saying they have to invest an hour with you, they can invest 5 minutes or 10 minutes doing an interaction. You're going to allow them more options. So as we look at this, now someone has multiple options at the top of the funnel to come in. And now once they're in their funnel, you have other options to keep pulling them down all the way through the bottom of the funnel. That's huge. Now you've given the consumer options, you've given them choice, and you're allowing them to really customize their own experience. At the same time, if you're using your core assets as your content and you're slicing and dicing it, that's not extra work for your content team. That's just that's amplifying the one message that you have. So hey, your message was that benchmark report. Take that data and repurpose it in lots of different ways, and now people have a really cool experience. And this is huge, and I think this is, for me, a powerful slide as I think about my own campaigns, because now I can really think about how content can really help campaigns to move people through the funnel. So let's take a quick example at a couple of examples of what you could do. The first is a very top of the funnel personality assessment that Influitive did. Some of you probably know Influitive. They're a great company, and they have lots of people, though, that are interested in their product. So what they wanted to do was create an experience to allow people to kind of figure out what content was best for them. So they had a bunch of content, and they wanted to be able to kind of string it together in a more conversation-like way. So they created this really fun thing, which is or a really fun assessment, where people had a chance to say what mattered to them, what they were interested in. And then at the end, they got a piece of content that was personalized to their personality type. That's really powerful. Think about yourselves when you go on Amazon, and Amazon puts up all the different things you can buy that are based on what you passed before. It's great. It's really helpful. It's really quick. It's easy. And you feel like they know you. It builds instant trust. And this is huge. It's huge for the user, and it's also huge for the marketer. So Influitive, yeah, they're giving a great experience. Awesome. We love that. At the same time, they're finding out, whoa, maybe we didn't know that most of the people that we market to are actually consider themselves social butterflies. That information is going to inform them, so that way once they develop future content, they can take that into mind. Maybe they'll create more things for people who are involved in social. Let's take another example and bring it a little bit more to the floor, literally the floor, the expo floor. So Oracle, like that joke? So Oracle has their modern marketing experience, and one thing that they're trying to do is get people more engaged and excited about the event. So I'm sure all you guys have gone to conferences, and sometimes it can be a real bear to kind of figure out, what sessions should I attend, what's best for me, and as an event organizer, that's huge. You want people to go to sessions. So Oracle created this really quick assessment where basically they asked people, what they were interested in. They asked them what type of marketer they were, why they were going to the conference, how advanced did they feel their skills were, whatever it may be. And it actually at the end gave them a customized schedule with saying, hey, you should go to these sessions at these time. At the same time, it also allowed them to promote all the wonderful reasons they should be going to Modern Marketing Experience and, give them a link to be able to share it out with their friends. And this is really helpful. It engages your audience before the events. Of course, you can also do something post-events and things like that, but this is a nice way just to get people more involved. The final case I wanted to talk to you about is something that I think is just so radical and so cool, and that's with HCSS. And they're a software company. So when you think software company and who they're targeting, you may not think it's like a typical use case, right? They have these, big, construction guys, and it turns out actually, I think it was 80% of their audience turns out to be guys. And so they, did this big kind of in-depth look at their audience, and they say, you know what, we have a bunch of guys who we sell to. Guys like sports, the March Madness is coming up. Let's create a bracket and allow people to show off their projects and allow people to really, be proud of their projects and, kind of compete and everything else. So they built this bracket, and it allowed them to have this conversation with their audience. And it turns out they had so many entries, they had to create 2 brackets because it was just so many people. They actually broke their website by the traffic, which I always think is a really cool stat. Wouldn't that be great if we could all break our websites because too many people are coming? And it's been a huge success. They got over 200,000 votes. This has been featured in Fortune magazine and everything else, but it's a good example of using your content to really listen, get that feedback from what's going on, and then continue to reiterate your content so you're having these personalized experiences with people. And these are some good examples of interactive content digitally, but we also have some really great examples on offline. So Samantha, why don't you take us through some things that you can do offline to create an interactive experience?
All right, thanks, Vanessa. Those were some really fun examples. So the first one I'm going to share here is an example from our customer Invoca. And I'll start off by saying that here at PFL, we don't like to think of direct mail as merely postcards. I know that's kind of a perception a lot of people have, is just postcards, junk mail in your mailbox. But we've seen some really cool high-impact pieces come through our doors, and this is one that I really like because of the extra interactive elements that it has. It has this calculator and pen and a worksheet, so it encourages the receiver to use the calculator and pen to fill out this worksheet and figure out how much revenue from paid search they're missing out on. And so it really plays into that lost language. It's interactive because you're completing this worksheet, looking at yourself as a business and how you could be doing better. And originally, Invoca was running this campaign or a similar campaign, but it was solely digital. So they were doing a pretty great multi-channel digital campaign with email, retargeting, some RTP, and phone calls mixed in there. But they were still seeing less than a 1% conversion rate. So when they added this interactive physical mailer piece to the campaign, they kept on with the follow-up calls and the RTP, their conversion rates actually jumped up to around 22%, which is awesome. And they were able to time those follow-up calls with the direct mail so that it was pretty relevant. The person received the direct mail, they had some time to complete the worksheet, and then, oh, here's a call from this Invoca person following up to see if I had any questions or concerns after I've completed this worksheet. So I really think that combination of the lost language there and the interactive elements really made it a great piece that got attention and then obviously drove the conversions they were looking for with that campaign. Another example is kind of interesting because you're actually making it harder for a buyer to see your content with this example. But it's totally worth it in the end because it's more engaging and it's a great tactic to use if you're taking more of an account-based marketing approach, which I know a lot of people in the B2B area are starting to do. So what you do is you send your key contact or a champion if you have one at your prospect company. you send them a key. And then you send a locked box to other stakeholders in the company that need to be part of that decision around your solution or product that you're selling. So the message on the box prompts those stakeholders, you need to go talk to so-and-so who's your champion to unlock this box and see what's inside. And then inside you might have some branded gifts or swag items, and then some collateral that they can then engage with. So this is a great way to drive engagement around a piece, but then also generate buzz within the whole organization. People are like, oh, I got this locked box. You don't really get that in the mail very often. And then it's really driving those conversations with your champion and the stakeholders. It gets them in a room, interacting with your brand, and talking about what they're going to do next. So if you're doing account-based marketing, I'd encourage you to think on ideas that include your champion, but then also engage those stakeholders. So this is one example of a way you can do that. So next I'm going to show a little piece that we actually do here at PFL. It's kind of a fun, we're kicking it old school here with a ViewMaster. If any of you online remember what one of those is, it's been a while probably since you've seen one. So we always think, like, if we're going to be telling a story, would you be more likely to read it in like a brochure format or a kind of a book format, or would you like to look through a ViewMaster? Obviously, I'd imagine most of you on here today would pick the second option and kind of relive a part of your childhood and click through a ViewMaster. So we have kind of a brand story in that ViewMaster that people click through, and kind of a fun piece that we're excited to be using internally here. Just a good way for people to digest your content. So we generally like to help our customers think outside the box on how they want to get that message across to users. And we've seen some really cool stuff that I didn't put on the slide here, but I want to still mention that we've seen come through our doors. One being a message in a bottle, where they actually stuffed their message, rolled it up and stuffed it in a glass bottle and sent that. And then their kind of messaging around it was, is your marketing lost at sea? So that was a great piece. Another one is a Cootie Catcher, which, if you're not familiar, that's kind of our middle school origami fortune teller that you used to use. We've seen people sending those, and we've even seen people send an event invite using a blown up balloon. So you open the box and a balloon floats out, and inside the balloon are some tickets with a promo code for the event that you then need to pop the balloon to get those tickets out. So those are all some really fun examples, and we just encourage you to use your imagination and try and be as creative as possible. I know in marketing it's easy to get swept up in the daily tasks and things you have to do, but it's good to step back and spend a few hours a day brainstorming with some people on how you can creatively and interactively engage with your audience through physical content. So we encourage you to do that. We're going to move into another poll here really quickly on, hopefully we've inspired you a bit with our examples on interactive content. But you're probably wondering, okay, these are great ideas, but how do I actually get started for myself? So I'd like to just kind of gauge the audience right now on what are some of your biggest barriers on using interactive content. We hear sometimes it's budget, it might be bandwidth, maybe you're lacking the technology that you need to implement, maybe you just are lacking ideas on what to do and you don't have time to think on that. Maybe you just don't have a clear strategy that you're rolling with. Maybe it's a mix of those, and possibly you're just killing it in your company and doing great with interactive content. If so, definitely send us a message, because we always like to see what people are doing that's working, and kudos to you if it is. But we're kind of seeing some answers coming in here. We'll give it a few more seconds and then we'll share the results. We're seeing a lot of people with the bandwidth budget, about 79% there. Technology, around 30%. Ideas is another big one at around 55%. And then lack of strategy too. Doesn't look like anyone's crushing it yet, but hopefully after this webinar you'll be well on your way to doing that. Cool. So it's clear that there are some barriers, and a lot of you just might be overwhelmed by the thought of interactive content. Like, we're busy with everything we're doing right now. How do we possibly squeeze something else in where we have to dedicate resources and possibly start over? But you know that it's so important for driving engagement that you can't really not do it. So we're just going to share a few tips on how to get you started quickly and get off the ground effectively, so that you can not be overwhelmed by this and get started. So first, you'll want to start with an audit of your lead funnel and really identify where you're struggling the most. Maybe you're lacking on top of the funnel leads, or maybe you're seeing some drop-offs in the middle, just maybe a general lack of engagement. It's really easy to say, yeah, we could do better everywhere. Sometimes we can all say that, but we really want to encourage you to think big, but start small. Really zero in on some pain points and think about what small changes you can make that will affect your business the most. You don't have to go and make every single piece of content you have interactive, or completely abandon every piece of content you have and start completely over. We're going to share 2 tips here on how you can leverage what you already have and go from there. So first, you can make some of the content you already have, like those big pieces like a white paper or an ebook, make those interactive. It's a quick method to start with because you don't have to use copywriters or anything to start over. You don't have to create really any new assets. You just have to do a little tweaking, enhancing here and there to make what already exists interactive. Another approach is to repurpose some of that pillar content, some of those white papers and ebooks, into several multiple interactive experiences. So this offers your audience different ways to engage with your content and campaign, and it means more campaign touchpoints, which means you'll boost the number of leads you capture and increase more lead scoring opportunities. Pretty much anywhere you currently use traditional content, you can consider going interactive. And we like to think of any big piece of content you invest in, you can likely make 10 to 20 derivative pieces of content interactive out of that, where you can produce those pretty quickly and without need for any IT resources. So this might include knowledge tests that use data in your research report. Maybe it's a poll that asks users to share their opinion that then you can then compare back to that research that you're sharing. It could be a calculator that helps a prospect assess the value they could get from your solution, and it could be a direct mail piece that creatively displays your message. So we're just going to move forward saying you chose to do option number 2 and you want to create some other interactive pieces of content out of that core asset. So I'm going to give control back to Vanessa here, and she's going to walk you through steps on how you would move forward from that.
Sounds good. All right, so 2 options, and just a quick note. Often I think that, big white papers, I think of them as like a piece of tuna, right? Tuna's got lots of nutrients. It's quite meaty. You can make lots. It'll last around forever, but tuna's not necessarily the most sexy thing out in the sea. However, if you were able to slice and dice it, you can make sushi, and that's really, for me, kind of interactive content. It's the sushi really out there. You're able to have something that's a lot more attractive and give people kind of the bite size so they can really pick and choose their own experience. And when you pick and choose your own experience, whether it is, taking an existing asset and, cutting it down or creating a new one, there's a couple of things that you want to start off with. The first thing is kind of, what's your main message? And I think this goes for anything that you create, whether it's interactive or not. But what are you really trying to get across to your audience? What's that conversation piece? So for example, let's say we're doing something net new. Let's do a couple of things. First, let's say we took that last poll, and I was looking at that poll and I was like, wow, coming up with ideas is a really hard piece. Well, the center of whatever I'm going to do is going to be all about ideation. How am I going to help people create those ideas? Another way to think about it, the holidays are coming up. Today's the first day of fall, and the only thing I can think about is what I'm going to wear for Halloween. And that could be something, right? We saw a customer once who took the whole theme of Halloween and created, they were a data backup and storage company, and they created this whole thing, which is like, how would you survive the data apocalypse? So, the world ends, it crashes, what are you going to do to save your data? And it was really fun, and they got a lot of really good insights, and it was a good opportunity for people to kind of share their challenges and fears. So whatever it may be, right, there's lots of ideas out there, you're going to want to pick a theme. The other thing you're going to want to do is maybe think about some data points that you can use to support that. So the one thing that I love about white papers is they have a lot of really good stats, right? Samantha shared earlier some really great stats about brain activity. We shared some stats earlier about a demand gen report. Being able to reuse those stats, and you could quiz people on how much they know, or what do they think, or challenge their ways. Those are really good kind of pivot points as you think about what you can pull in your content. The other thing about data is you should be thinking about what data you want, right? So we've talked a lot about what you're giving to the user, but you should think about what you want back in return. So what are you actually looking for? The one thing about lead forms today, whether you're using progressive profiling or not, is it's all very kind of simple demographic data. First name, last name, email, firstborn child, etc., right? It doesn't really matter. But that's not really what sales wants. Sales wants what's their biggest priority, what's their biggest challenge, right? Our sales team would love to know what people's, barriers are to creating interactive content. That gives them a talking point when they finally get on the phone with you or they email you what's important. Now, if I were to ask that, say, for example, in a lead form, it might be kind of an awkward experience to answer a question that is a little bit more valuable. But if I were to ask it in the middle of a conversation and in the middle of an experience, people are much more willing to give their information. So those are some key things to think about, the themes, data points that you want to give, and data points you want to get. But once you have that, you're going to need to think about what kind of format works best to convey that message. What type of format works best to convey that data? What format works best to receive that data? And there's lots of different options for you. You can create, these are some content types that you can do. You can do assessments, you can do polls, calculators, interactive videos, direct mail, contests, brackets, whatever it may be, right, for this interaction. But once you pick your format, you can think about, do I want this to be a unique standalone experience? Meaning, hey, I'm going to have an ROI calculator and it's just going to live on my website. So that way, anyone that comes to my website, they can go to my pricing page, they can go to my home page, they're going to fill out that calculator and they're going to get some sort of value. Or is this something that's going to be on top of something else, right? So are we going to put an interactive content on an infographic? So you already have this wonderful infographic. Are you just going to add questions to it? Are you going to layer something on top of the video so now you can get more information from your video on top of your white paper, whatever it may be? And these are some ways to think about, what format works best for your audience and how you kind of want to contrive that campaign, which let's get into campaigns. So, whoops, it went too fast. Once you have your campaign, what we're seeing here is what we're kind of doing today. So today, for example, you may have a white paper. You release that white paper. You may put out a blog post. You may blast your audience with an email. That email is going to say download now, read now. Maybe would then lead into a webinar, right? You've read our white paper, great, now come attend our webinar, then read our success story, whatever it may be. But it's a pretty linear path, which is great. And if even you did what we have here, that would be amazing. You probably feel pretty good about yourself. But what's nice about interactive content is you can just add in more options so people can really pick and choose what they want, and it gives them more methods to go on to the next thing. So let's look here. What we saw in blue was what you had before. Those are all traditional forms of content. But by layering in interactive content on top of that, you have a much more robust, personalized, and interesting experience. And for me as a marketer, I really like this. I have to say, at some point in my marketing career, I felt like it was getting kind of boring. I knew what to do. I knew exactly what to do every time we had a white paper. It was the same formula over and over. With interactive content and creating kind of these experiences, it's allowed me to think much more creatively about my campaigns. It's allowed me to just, feel really cool about what I'm producing and know that I'm giving my users a good experience. And our customers say the same thing, right? And that's really what it's about. It's about pushing the envelope and really creating some amazing experiences. And once you kind of have everything in place, you can start to put your campaign into action. Whoops. You can start putting your campaign in action and start thinking about creating this multi-touch, multi-asseted campaign over several weeks. And suddenly now you see you have all these bits of content, right, all working together. Instead of demand gen and content being siloed, they're really working together to create this amazing experience for your users. And this is how we're going to get new business. We're not going to get downloads with this. No, we're way beyond downloads. We're going to get new business, and we're going to get business quickly. And with that, I think we're going to go over some tips. So, Samantha, do you want to kick off some tips on how people kind of bring in this home for everyone?
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. So we'll get started with one of my favorite quotes that I use often, but it's very applicable here. And that is that you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. And that is totally true for interactive content. You know, making irrelevant or unhelpful content interactive isn't going to be your magic bullet. You still need to put that time and thought and strategy into making sure the content you're sharing is the right content at the right time for the person you're talking to. And more content isn't the answer either. It's really about making content that resonates with your audience. So don't attempt to put lipstick on any pigs, people.
Absolutely. And it's not just that. You have to really be able to learn from your content, right? If you're not getting any insights from your content, if you're not interpreting those results, you can't make better content. So learn from your content and really help people figure out what they want. People want things to be fast. They want it to be easy. It shouldn't be hard. So learn from what they're giving you and use it to make better experiences.
Definitely. And then part of that is, in making that better experience for that customer, you need to know what's working and what's not. So make sure you're set up to track the effectiveness of any of your interactive content. You know, nothing is worse than spending resources on an interactive piece and then not being able to track ROI or to justify it. The more you know about what's working and, you know, some insight into why, the more use you'll get out of it and the better you'll be moving forward with other interactive pieces and really shaping that user experience the way it should be shaped. All right?
Absolutely. And the only way that you're going to be able to measure effectiveness is by experimenting, right? You have to be able to do A/B tests, and you actually have to try. So, for example, you know, maybe you're not quite ready for a full-on Snap App solution. Maybe you're not quite ready for a full-on printing for less solution. But try a pilot. You know, try sending something out. Try creating a free survey on SurveyMonkey. Whatever it may be, just go out and experiment. One of my mentors in life once told me, if you're not sure if it's going to be able to get through, just put the word pilot on it and just try it. Just put the word pilot and let it be, and I think you'll see some really great stuff from that.
Definitely. And this final little tip here kind of ties in with number 3 and 4 on, you know, don't just set and forget. You might be like, oh, this is working. The first 2 weeks of this interactive piece has just been driving some great results. We're good. We're just going to forget about it and let it do its thing. Because something that worked well 2 months ago for your audience might not be working well, you know, 5 months later. You really need to check in on your content results often and make sure you're making any tweaks necessary to keep seeing benefit out of them and to keep providing that good user experience. So with that, we're kind of wrapping up what we had to talk with you about today. We did have some questions come in, so I want to make sure we answer those. One, it seemed like one of you was having, or a couple of you might have been having issues on actually submitting a question or a chat. So I'll give you a little chance to do that while I address some other questions. But if you're looking at your GoToWebinar dashboard or control panel, there should be a section with a title section that says questions /chat with a plus sign next to it. if you're seeing that, just click on the plus sign to expand it, and then you'll see the place where you can type in your question. So feel free to do that now, and we'll start with another question that's come in. One is, how should you approach planning direct mail content differently than digital? So I'll go ahead and tackle this one first, if that's okay, Vanessa. It's a really great question. There are several things you'll want to keep in mind that you normally wouldn't need to do with a digital piece. First of all is the call to action is critical. So I've mentioned it previously here that physical pieces are great at driving that digital action, but only if they're done right. You can't really click on a direct mail piece, so you really have to make sure that your call to action is prominent, it's clear, and it's just really easy for someone to complete. So whether it's a short URL or it's a PURL, or maybe it's a hashtag they're supposed to use on social, just make sure that that's prominent for them to see and use. Another thing I'd keep in mind is with a physical send is that it's going to, I said this before, but it's really going to be more effective when it's part of a multi-channel campaign. And there's tools now to where you can set up your marketing automation platform to trigger a send of a physical piece, and then it's tied into that overall multi-channel campaign within your platform, so you can not only track how it's doing, you can trigger alerts on a delivery to your sales team so that they can make a timely follow-up call, or maybe once it's delivered you want to send out immediately another piece of interactive content that ties into it. I would just make sure that if everything's working together, the overall experience is going to be better for both you as a marketer and then your end user. Another question we have coming in is, to what extent does interactive content bloat current marketing expenses? Do you have a figure for it? Do you have anything there, Vanessa?
Yeah, so I mean, I can add for it, and I'll speak from our own customers' experience. So, Snap App is a SaaS platform, so our customers purchase Snap App, and then they can create as much interactive content as they want, depending on their package. So it's actually not an additional cost. The only cost is just time and resources, right? So you'll need someone probably to help make the content, whether it's someone on your content team, demand gen team, it can be anyone, and then just time to put into it. But no extra really cost there. It's about the same amount of effort. Actually, it's way less than effort, I think, to create a white paper because you already have the stuff there. So I hope that answers the question. I mean, the thing about it is I think a lot of people see interactive content and get kind of really overwhelmed really quickly, like, oh my gosh, like I must have dev resources, this must be so expensive and this or that, and it really isn't. And I think that's one of the challenges that we need to be clear on. This is actually quite easy, and there's lots of ways, point solutions that you can start with for free and see if that works for you. We actually have a new tool too, if you guys just want to take your PDFs and just see what it would look like by making them animated. It's called LeaveRev, and you guys can go check it out on the Snap App website.
Great. Another question we have coming in that I'll let you take another first stab at, Vanessa, is how do you gauge what type of interactive experience or interactive content is best for different personas?
Yeah, for this one, I think it's the same thing that you would do when you create a piece of content, which is really look at your buyer persona. So you should, whether you do interactive content or not, or interactive experiences, you should really do a deep dive on who your buyers are. What do they like? Who are they? What do they do? What are the challenges? What are the concerns? And then I would really put yourself in their shoes. So if you are creating a great big white paper, we know that white papers typically have a 5% conversion rate. So where's the other 95% going? So you have to figure out what are other ways that I can attract that 95% of people who didn't download this white paper, right, but they went to that landing page, and how do I convert them? So I would say it's a whole host of things. It's trying lots of different things. We find, for example, things that work in paid media work kind of top the funnel. They have no idea who you are. They just clicked on your thing. That interactive experience is going to be very different than someone who's been in your funnel, right, and that's been sitting in your parking lot, which we call our nurture stream, right, and you're just trying to drip on these people. We find that those people seem to really enjoy much more kind of lightweight experiences that are a little bit more kind of how they can think about the industry and stuff. So at the end of the day, it goes back to knowing your buyer, knowing their persona, and trying lots of different things. We mentioned experimentation. This is a great and easy way to experiment.
Great. Another question we have coming in is, are there some industries that respond better to interactive content? I mean, I can take a quick stab at that as far as the physical interactive side of thing. We haven't really seen much of a difference by industry. Depending, it just goes back to really knowing your audience, and if there is a specific industry that you're targeting, is really knowing what will get them to engage. What do they really care about? I feel like sometimes people are like, oh, well, they're in this enterprise company and they're really high up, they're not going to want to play with something like a viewfinder. But in the end, we're all people. We all like to have fun. Just because you're an executive at an enterprise company doesn't mean that you're going to engage more with a boring white paper than you would with a quiz or a calculator or some kind of other fun interactive piece. So I would really just try, like I said, concentrate on that, who your persona is, and experiment. Maybe you'll see more luck with a certain industry with a calculator versus some kind of quiz or something, but I would say experiment. Vanessa, do you have anything to add there?
No, I would just echo that. I think there's lots of industries that you think, like you said, wouldn't be interested. They are, and it's because we're all human. So try lots of different things. We've seen all our customers, for example, are from multiple different industries. So just go for it. Got nothing to lose.
Great. It looks like our final question here, unless some come in while we're talking, is on, it says, I'm in favor of physical content, agree with the connection, the brain part, etc. But how do we overcome convincing decision makers that the spend is worthwhile, that ROI on the physical piece? That's a great question. What I would say is, we have several examples where someone is using solely digital channels, and like in Boca I mentioned earlier, was only seeing a 1% conversion rate. When they added that dimensional piece, they were seeing 22% conversion. So the key there is being able to track it. Traditional direct mail and dimensional mail just being sent out in batch or on its own, it sometimes can be hard to track. Someone might not click through to the link that you shared on your content piece, but maybe in the back end they are actually really engaging with it and excited about it. What we do encourage is keeping that part of your marketing automation so that you can see what has been delivered, and then you can get alerts to where you can do a follow-up, and then track, did that person respond to our follow-up email or a follow-up call? And if so, how did that impact their journey? So I would say just making sure that you're tracking it, and maybe just starting off with some tests. Maybe send a few smaller interactive pieces that are still interactive but might not be as expensive, with some kind of valuable gift in it or something. Start out with that and see kind of what return you're getting, and then move forward with maybe a more expensive piece. But it's really, the key is having it being targeted outreach. It's not that batch and blast send to everyone on your list. You can set up in your marketing automation to listen to certain triggers, like this person engaged with our online interactive calculator. Now would be a great time to send this follow-up physical copy of a calculator or a worksheet that ties into it. Maybe it just takes it a step further. And then the likelihood of them engaging with that just goes up, and that experience will help create those conversions that you're looking for to get back to that ROI. Does that answer that question, I hope? If not, let us know. All right, it looks like we're pretty much coming up to our end of the time here. If anyone has additional questions for us, feel free to reach out to Vanessa or myself. We have our Twitter handles here on the screen. And then we have some additional resources as well if you'd like to check out. Take a look there. And then if you want to experience kind of a dimensional piece, just send me a quick email with your address and your name and your information, and we'll send you a fun dimensional interactive piece in the mail for you to check out and sink your fingers into it. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. Thanks, Vanessa, for joining us and sharing your knowledge. I really appreciate that. And
No
I
problem.
guess we'll
Thanks,
finish
everyone.
it there. Just a reminder, everything will be emailed. The recording and the slide deck will be sent to you guys after this shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.